Have you ever stopped to think about who's standing in the classroom with your children? A teacher is the one entrusted with the future, the person allowed to speak, inspire, influence. But what if that light, meant to spark minds, suddenly becomes a flame that burns everything around? In a small town in Indiana, life moved along quietly and predictably. Here, people knew each other, by name, by face, by habits. Doors were often left unlocked, kids played in yards until dusk, and schools were considered the safest place on earth. That was until a new teacher arrived at one of them, smiling, confident, with a kind gaze and a gentle voice that drew in teenagers. Her name was Brittany Fortinberry. At first, it looked like a success story. A young woman dreaming of changing her students' lives, doing exactly what was expected of her, inspiring, supporting, helping them find themselves. But behind the soft words and warm smiles, a shadow began to appear. A few oddities at first, seemingly minor. Far too many personal conversations, gifts, jokes that probably shouldn't have been made in class. Then, messages that vanished without a trace. And soon, something that would forever change the lives of several families and shatter the illusion of safety in an entire town. Brittany Fortinberry was born in Indiana in 1993. From childhood, she dreamed of being a teacher. It made sense to her that school was a place where one could inspire and change lives. After graduating from college with a degree in education, she began her career in schools around her state. In 2018, Brittany married firefighter Nicholas Fortinberry. Soon, they had a child. The family appeared wholesome. She taught at Martinsville High School, later at Eminence High School, and also served briefly as a teacher at Mountains View High. Colleagues described her as energetic, attentive to her students, always positive. But behind that outward cheerfulness, there lay growing insecurity and a sharp hunger for recognition. Approval from others became a constant need. Gradually, student attention seemed to become her internal measure of balance. A kind and ambitious woman, seeking respect, she began looking for proof of her own importance, not in professional achievements, but in the personal evaluations of those around her. It was that shift that became the first warning sign of the changes that soon turned into a disaster. When Brittany Fortinberry first started working at the school, students quickly saw her as one of their own. She stood out from other teachers, not because of strict rules or tough discipline, but because of her laid-back attitude, friendly demeanor, and genuine willingness to listen. She believed in having equal, open conversations, often discussing not just school material, but the students' personal interests too. This approach helped build a strong sense of trust. Parents and school administrators praised her for creating a safe space where students felt heard. To many, Brittany seemed like the perfect example of a modern educator. But over time, her openness crossed the line of professional boundaries. She increasingly tried to be a friend rather than a mentor, messaging students outside school hours and becoming involved in their personal lives. For the teens, it felt like special attention. For Brittany, it became a way to meet her own emotional needs. Gradually, the attention and admiration became something she craved. She no longer looked for validation from her peers or even her own family. What mattered most was that her students saw her as someone special. That thin line between trust and boundary blurring began to fade, and that's when the slow unraveling of her life began. By early 2023, people around Brittany noticed a change. Within just a few months, she lost over 65 pounds. She spoke frequently about her new lifestyle, posted before and after photos, and received a flood of compliments and likes. At first, it looked like a personal win. But beneath the surface, it was clear. This was about more than just health. The weight loss became her way of proving to herself that she could still attract attention, still be admired. After that, Brittany began to focus more on her appearance than her job. New outfits, makeup, carefully posed photos, It all looked like confidence on the outside. But in reality, it deepened her dependence on validation from others. At work, co-workers began to notice her emotional swings. One day, overly energetic, the next withdrawn or irritable. In class, she became softer, more eager to be seen as relatable, like one of the kids. But it wasn't just about appearances anymore. Brittany started to open up to her friends about how lonely she felt. Her husband, a firefighter, was often away on long shifts. Their child was growing older and needed her less, and the emotional connection she once felt at home began to fade. She didn't seek support from other adults. Instead, it was her teenage students who gave her the attention she craved. They saw her as modern, cool, and approachable, and that made her feel needed. By spring 2023, Brittany was using social media more actively to stay connected with students. Her presence on Instagram and Snapchat became noticeable. Selfies from the classroom, short videos with commentary, replies to students' stories. At first, it all seemed harmless. She'd message things like, "How'd that test go?" or "You finished the project?" Students would respond, and the conversation would continue. Slowly, she shifted into more personal topics: who they hung out with, how they spent their evenings, what shows they were watching. Before long, it felt like she wasn't just their teacher, she was part of their inner circle. Snapchat made it easy to have conversations without leaving a trace. Messages would disappear within seconds. It was the perfect tool for Brittany to carry on chats that would later become central evidence in a growing investigation. According to authorities, these conversations often started with innocent academic advice, but quickly shifted in tone. They took place late at night, filled with offbeat emojis and phrases no teacher should be sending. Even though some of the teens sensed that something felt off, they didn't know how or whether to pull away. Brittany had a way of creating the illusion of safety and control. When one student tried to back off, she'd message him that he could trust her, that he was special, that he understood her better than the others. Those words landed deeply, convincing the student to keep talking. It would later come out that Brittany used disappearing chats and hidden settings to avoid leaving a record. Sometimes she'd send photos, not breaking any outright rules, but clearly crossing lines for a teacher. Pictures from her personal life, taken at home or in mirror reflections, began to surface in private messages. Eventually, some students started to understand that these conversations were not like the ones they had with other teachers. One student recalled feeling uncomfortable, but said he was too afraid to speak up, worried no one would believe him. Another just deleted the messages and tried to forget. The common thread? Anxiety and silence. To Brittany, this became routine. Each interaction only strengthened her belief that she was still in control. But these very messages would later become the first clear signs of a deeper pattern, one that would lead to formal accusations and criminal charges. Once online chats became Brittany Fortinberry's norm, she started building even closer connections with students outside of messaging. At first, it all seemed harmless. She'd bring sweets to class, hand out baked goods, buy drinks for students before sports practice. To them, it felt like kindness. No one saw it as a red flag. Then came the first small gifts. Brittany would hand out a new water bottle, a pen, or a keychain with the school logo. Sometimes she remembered little details from conversations and turned them into personal surprises. A t-shirt from a favorite team, a phone case, a pair of earbuds. She paid close attention so that her gestures felt casual, not staged. From the outside, it looked like generosity. Over time, though, the gifts became more expensive. According to later court records, some students received sneakers, clothes, even gaming gear. Brittany explained it away, saying she just wanted to support the ones who had earned a reward. She made sure not to broadcast it. Instead, she framed it as our little secret. That added a feeling of exclusivity, a bond of trust between her and the teens she singled out. To those students, her attention felt like proof they mattered. She gave nicknames, asked about their wins, offered advice. In return, they didn't want to disappoint her. They protected the bond. Slowly, a small circle began to form. Students who felt closer to her than anyone else in the building. For Brittany, this became a way to stay in control. She built her relationships on rewards. Praise and gifts went hand in hand with promises, help with grades, a glowing recommendation letter, or a chance to talk privately after class. To the students, it all seemed like trust and support. They didn't realize that they were slowly becoming dependent on her attention. Whenever someone started to pull away, Brittany made sure to re-establish contact. She'd message them late at night, invite them to talk, or mention how she missed their conversations. That kind of emotional pull was confusing. Students couldn't tell where genuine care ended and subtle pressure began. From the outside, it looked friendly, even nurturing. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet system taking shape. Brittany divided her attention carefully, making sure each special student felt unique and irreplaceable. Over time, those bonds stopped being professional. They evolved into complicated emotional dependencies, and walking away often came with guilt. Once Brittany Fortinberry was fully settled at Eminence High School, her interactions with students began extending beyond school grounds. She started inviting certain students over to her house, saying she just wanted to have a calm talk without interruptions. For parents, it didn't raise alarm bells. Brittany was a respected teacher, a married woman, well known in the area. There was nothing, at least on the surface, that seemed suspicious. The Fortinberry home sat on the edge of Martinsville, in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors kept to themselves. At night, the house was dimly lit, only the glow from the TV or a single lamp visible through drawn curtains. Students who had been there later described the atmosphere as too personal for a teacher and strangely relaxed for someone working with kids. Brittany often greeted guests casually, wearing loungewear, offering snacks, trying to make the visit feel easygoing. She kept the mood light, but always made it clear what happened there stayed between them. Conversations that began with school topics or sports practice quickly turned personal. Students recalled that she often opened up about her own problems, feeling exhausted, misunderstood, or lonely, and by doing so, she won their sympathy and trust. Details uncovered during the investigation suggested that the room where these meetings took place contained objects that seemed inappropriate for a teacher's home setting. At the time, none of the students fully grasped how far things had gone. To them, these were just secret hangouts. Brittany skillfully manipulated their trust, creating a closed world where boundaries blurred until they disappeared completely. The first reports of these visits surfaced later, once the investigation began. Several students, interviewed separately, described the exact same details of the house: furniture, decor, even the color of the curtains. It became clear to investigators that these meetings were not isolated incidents. They were regular, recurring encounters that carried an uncomfortably personal tone. According to student statements, Brittany occasionally hosted what she called theme nights, asking them to wear masks from horror movies. At first, it felt like a harmless joke, but the atmosphere shifted fast. The curtains would be drawn, loud music filled the room, and snacks with an odd taste were served. After eating them, some students said they felt dizzy, disoriented, their thoughts cloudy and hard to control. Investigators would later suggest that the food served during these theme nights may have been laced with restricted substances that caused a light mental haze. Students recalled that the evenings felt disjointed in their memories, like flashes, fragments, and the whole experience began to resemble a kind of ritual. Brittany called it a trust exercise, part of a game, but it was clear that the behavior of those involved followed her lead. Over time, these meetings took on the form of a closed circle, with Brittany positioning herself as the one in charge. Students felt like they couldn't walk away and certainly couldn't tell anyone. The pressure intensified. Brittany reminded them of the gifts and asked them to keep everything between them. And they did. For a long time, the silence held. Each of them believed it was just happening to them. But in August 2024, that silence finally started to crack. Two students from Eminence High School, both assigned as classroom assistants, came forward to the school administration. They said their teacher had been messaging them in ways that didn't feel right. According to their account, the messages had started off about school, but gradually became personal and clearly crossed professional boundaries. At first, the administration responded with caution. They didn't want a scandal. Brittany had a good reputation, and firing her too quickly would have raised eyebrows. But then the students brought proof. Screenshots, chat logs, and detailed descriptions of conversations. That was enough for the administration to notify the students' guardians and alert the district education office. The next day, Brittany was placed on temporary leave pending further review. She was informed of the internal investigation, though the full details of the complaint were not disclosed to her. That evening, she deleted her social media accounts and stopped answering calls from coworkers. By morning, she had submitted her resignation, citing stress and family reasons. The school administration wanted to close the matter quickly and quietly to avoid wider exposure, but the lack of official statements and the suddenness of her resignation sparked rumors among faculty and parents. The doubts reached the county prosecutor's office, and the case was passed to investigators. Just days after Brittany's departure, detectives from Morgan County began examining her digital footprint. They dug into her Instagram and Snapchat activity, especially focusing on disappearing messages, just as students had described. That data would become the starting point of a full-scale investigation, one that would soon reveal connections between incidents at both Martinsville High School and Eminence High School. For the two students who had come forward, the decision wasn't easy. They knew their words could destroy the life of someone many had seen as a kind and caring teacher. But fear and doubt gave way to a deeper realization. Staying silent would only prolong the harm. And from that moment on, Brittany Fortinberry's story was no longer just a whispered school rumor. It became a criminal case, one that would soon make headlines across the entire state of Indiana. In December 2024, the investigation into Brittany Fortinberry took an unexpected turn. An elderly woman walked into the Morgan County prosecutor's office, demanding an urgent meeting with an investigator. She introduced herself as the grandmother of a 16-year-old student. After the news broke about Brittany's detainment, her grandson finally opened up, revealing that he too had been involved. Her account would become a turning point in the case, bringing to light an incident that had taken place all the way back in 2023, when Fortinberry was still working at Martinsville High School. According to the woman, her grandson had stayed silent for months. But after seeing the headlines, he couldn't keep it in any longer. He said that at first, it all seemed like a teacher just being caring. Brittany brought him food, gave him small gifts, and made conversation. Then came the personal messages, followed by off-campus meetings. He claimed that after eating something she gave him one evening, he suddenly felt sick and couldn't remember parts of what happened later. These details lined up with previous statements made by other students. The case was handed to Detective Patrick Williams, who had already been involved in reviewing Brittany's digital communications. He began piecing things together: dates, phone records, message histories, interior descriptions of her home. There were far too many matches for it to be coincidence. Based on the new evidence, authorities secured a warrant for another search of the Fortinberry home. Investigators seized electronics, handwritten notes, and physical items that directly matched what students had previously described. Once this information went public, it sparked a wave of responses. Families from other schools where Brittany had worked began coming forward, concerned their children might have also had contact with her. The investigation had now shifted from isolated incidents to what looked like a disturbing behavioral pattern. Thanks to one grandmother's decision to speak out and her grandson's courage, the case expanded. It was no longer just a local issue, more victims, more witnesses, and for the first time, people were ready to talk. Nicholas Fortinberry, Brittany's husband, had long been respected for his calm demeanor and reliability. He worked as a firefighter, someone trusted in times of crisis. But as the investigation deepened, it became clear that his image made the unfolding story all the more shocking. Multiple students reported that Nicholas had been home during some of the encounters. They said he didn't intervene. He acted like he didn't notice what was going on. One student recalled seeing him in the hallway while Brittany hosted one of her discussion nights. Others remembered him passing by the room without asking questions. Investigators later confirmed that Nicholas was aware of students visiting the home. Some witnesses even alleged that he helped his wife organize the gatherings, describing it as assisting with school projects. When called in for questioning, Nicholas denied knowing anything, but his statements didn't match the evidence or the students' testimonies. Soon after, he was formally charged with concealing information and intimidating minors. For the local community, it was devastating. A man once seen as a lifesaver was now at the center of a case that shattered the public's faith in a family once considered exemplary. By early February 2025, the investigation into Brittany Fortinberry had entered its final stage. After months of collecting testimonies and analyzing evidence, the Morgan County Prosecutor's Office issued a warrant for her arrest. Brittany was taken into custody outside her home in Martinsville early in the morning. She didn't resist, but during questioning, she denied several of the allegations, claiming the messages and meetings had been misinterpreted. Her explanations, however, didn't match the facts. Investigators had compiled extensive evidence from text conversations, phone data, and student testimonies. At the same time, charges were also brought against her husband, Nicholas Fortinberry. He was arrested just a few days after Brittany. At a press conference, Detective Patrick Williams confirmed that the case spanned multiple incidents between 2023 and 2024. He stated that the charges against Brittany included using digital platforms for inappropriate communication with students and serious violations of professional boundaries. All affected students were granted protected witness status, and their identities remained confidential. Following the official announcements, the public reaction was immediate and intense. Parents demanded answers. The school district launched an internal investigation. In both Martinsville and Eminence, the community wrestled with the question, how could someone with such a spotless reputation hide something like this? For many locals, it shattered their trust, not just in a single teacher, but in the entire educational system. But one thing was clear. After being ignored for so long, the voices of the students were finally heard. What once seemed like small, isolated concerns had become the foundation of a major criminal case. Authorities confirmed that the actions of Brittany and Nicholas Fortinberry caused real harm, not only to individual students, but to the broader sense of safety within the school environment. What started as a private matter had become a high-profile legal case, one that would reshape how teacher oversight was handled across the entire county. By spring 2025, the legal battle reached its peak. The Morgan County Prosecutor's Office, after months of interviews, expert reviews, and evidence gathering, formally charged Brittany Fortinberry with 41 separate counts. These included distribution of inappropriate material to minors, unprofessional digital communication, manipulation of students, and severe breaches of teacher conduct. As of summer 2025, Brittany Fortinberry remained in custody without bail, awaiting a final verdict. Her husband, Nicholas Fortinberry, was also being held in a separate investigation tied to the same case. When the judge announced a delay in the proceedings to allow for further forensic review, the courtroom fell silent. No one doubted that the outcome would be a guilty verdict. But even before the judgment was read, the consequences were already irreversible. Trust, once lost, doesn't come back. And as one parent at a community meeting said, "The scariest monster is the one that knows how to smile."